So, welcome to another episode of our series here, Dob and Bob. We are going to talk about today. One of the big controversial things that's going on in the news is the Stoic view of Confederate statues. So, that's what we got going on today because, it's good to think about ethical questions. It's good to think about stuff that bother not just us, but society as a whole. And yeah, it's good to look at. So, let's
Yeah.
Let's get to it. All right. So the issue, what is the controversy? And a lot of people probably know this, and I'll just go ahead and read the quote. It says from BBC, most defenders of Confederate symbols say that they are not meant to memorialize slavery, which the South fought to preserve. They say that the war was fought for states' rights and against the federal system, adding that symbols such as the Confederate battle flag commemorate the region's history and culture. But most historians agree it was about slavery. Racial minorities, especially Black Americans, feel that their presence in public life is offensive. So, just an overview. A lot of people know. I don't know. I felt like I had to be professional and put up a professional article from a news site. So there's that. There's that. Okay, so Dobby, question: how do we deconstruct impressions as a Stoic? Do you want to go ahead and take the slide, or?
It might be best, if you would, Bob, go back to the slide, to the previous slide.
There it is.
All right. All right. So if we look at the controversy here, taking it as it is, as this quote, we have argument for symbolism to commemorate culture and symbolism that is offensive. Let's use that as our framework. If you go to the next slide now.
For sure, for sure.
All right. Okay, so opinion, expectations about the statue. So we have two opinions here, right? Neither of which are bad, neither of which are necessarily good. The issue is that it becomes difficult to distinguish whose opinion is right, if there is such a thing, or whose opinion is wrong, because each group has a different set of expectations about what the statues represent, what the statues will mean to those who fought and won, the expectations about the statues as those of us or those who were oppressed, during that time period. So what you have to do, honestly, is just look at, do you want me to go through all of them, Bob, or did you want to go to the second one?
Yeah, you can take all of them, and then we can flip off on the actual slides that talk about it.
Okay, so if we just look at the event for what it was, what happened? Statues were erected after the Civil War. Anything else? No, nothing else. Statues were erected after the Civil War. The judgment about the nature of the statue is where we form the opinions about those statues. For example, I see the statue and the judgment I place on it is that it is racially insensitive. You see the statue, the judgment you make about it is that it represents what your forefathers stood for and the battle that they won, and it's a symbol of pride. It's those judgments that we attach to the event that really determine how we feel about it. So because I've judged it in this way, and you've judged it in that way, and there's really no clear way to distinguish whose judgment is right or wrong, your feelings, honestly, are just as valid in your opinion as my feelings are in my opinion. Thus follows our behaviors. So I feel a sense of injustice, and I behave as one who has been unjustly acted upon. You feel just. you behave as someone who is acting just to defend your position. Thus, we continue to have this same series of opinion, judgment, I feel justified, and we behave. Here's the kicker. There really is a way to determine proper judgment if you remove some of the, well, perhaps I'm getting further into some of the slides. So I'll just stop right there. Bob, did you want to add anything to what I just said on this slide?
No, I'm just really in awe kind of right now. I'm like, that's a really good explanation. So no, I don't think I have to add it. So good stuff, man. Good stuff. Okay. So now that we have the outline that Dobby just talked about, now we can sort of go look at each of these individually and kind of look at more of what it means to deconstruct.
Yeah.
So the first step is the opinions and expectations about the statues. And most of us have been taught that statues are things that we should remember, not necessarily battle statues, but just statues in general, right? We want to have something that memorializes or reminds us of a certain time. So that's kind of something that about statues that a lot of us, especially I guess Americans and Westerners, kind of think about.
Right.
And this is really important. This second point, I think, Dobby, really goes to what you were kind of saying about judgments, is that we need to realize that people on all sides of conflicts want to build things that fits their opinion. That is very important, not in just seeing people for their true nature, but also empathizing with people that you might not agree with.
Absolutely, because a Stoic tenet is that people err unintentionally. I mean, that's kind of what we believe, or we try to believe. It's the sense that people go wrong inadvertently because the judgments they formed about things are in their best interest. At least they think so. And until you introduce a new way, a new perspective, a new lens through which they can view those things, they're really doing the best that they can. And you'll always have the opposite viewpoint. I mean, just how we had statues of MLK erected. I'm sure there were people on the opposite side who felt that he shouldn't have statues erected. So it's always this perfect balance, if you will, of good and evil, right and wrong, left, right, whatever, two sides of the coin always have to exist. And until, there's an understanding of why we're making these judgments, I don't see how we progress rather than repeat.
Yeah. And I would add that a lot of people today are set not on looking inward and reflecting and looking at our judgments, but rather vilifying the other side. There's a lot of that today.
Absolutely.
For sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Next step. So this is just the event. This is the simple event of what happened. And the event was people built Confederate statues. They're all around, and I kind of should make this clear, is that not only are they Confederate statues, but statues of Christopher Columbus that just got taken down in Tower Grove, for example. There's other statues that people have kind of controversial opinions about, not necessarily just from the Civil War. So,
right, sure,
good point. That was kind of the easy step, looking at the event. Step 3, here we go.
Judgments.
So this is the judgment of people and statues this is where we kind of get to sort of see all the players on the table, right? And so when we make judgments about people and the statues that were made during the Civil War, obviously people in the South fought to uphold slavery because that was the foundational economic sort of situation at the time.
Their decision, their best interest.
Yeah. What'd you say, Dobby?
They were protecting their best interest.
Yeah, they were protecting their best interest. They saw it as good. Their decision was outside of our control. And that is so important, because a lot of people today feel, victimization, they feel shame, they feel a lot of these negative emotions that are like, I have to, calm down and say, hey, those were people that lived a couple hundred years ago. You weren't that person. We're good. And it's kind of really clear to look at that in objective lens. And then the third bullet says, I should realize that people in history, and we're going to get to this too with some quotes, often make stupid decisions to uphold their moral views and their moral ones. Both sides, people make stupid decisions. It's a historical fact. This is nothing new. Try to empathize with the Southerners that held these views. What was their intentions? That's probably one of the most difficult things to do, especially with, it's so taught in our society these days that, it was a very negative thing. It's very hard to empathize and sort of humanize your enemy. And that's kind of a challenge for a lot of situations. And then lastly, are there any benefits to having these statues around? So that's kind of one of the considerations for action for the next step of the process.
Mm-hmm. I asked my son, he's going into high school. He'll be a freshman next year. And I said, the issue with the statues being removed and people, what's going on in the news. And he said, yeah, I understand. I said, what do you think? Should they be removed? Should they be torn down? What's your opinion? And he said, well, I think we should keep them, like not have them destroyed, but like maybe put them in a museum for, historical references and to be able to talk about what happened and discuss things. But I don't see the relevance of having them around in public anymore. I said, hey, well done, freshman. I thought that was a pretty good observation. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, for sure. Always give credit where it's due with kids practicing Stoic thoughts and practices. Right. So that's always good. And for that last one, that second to last one, what was their intentions? And it might be that their intentions were terrible. It might be their intentions were noble. Arguably, probably not in this case. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, it's hard to come to the table and entertain different sides of the story, because I think it was Aristotle that said it takes the wise person to entertain thoughts without submitting to them or giving into them or something like that. Mm-hmm. Rough paraphrase there. So, okay, next slide. Getting into some quotes. I guess I'll you want me to read my two and then.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I love this, and I love when Marcus Aurelius, being an emperor, he kind of reflects on history, and I feel like there's not a lot of people that do it in the same way. And so I'll go ahead and read this short passage. He tells himself, meditations, he tells himself, recollect, for example, the times of Vespasian, and you will see all the same things you see now. Men marrying, bringing up children, sickening, dying, fighting, feasting, trading, farming, flattering, obstinate in their own will, suspicious, undermining their neighbors, wishing the death of others, repining at their present circumstances, courting mistresses, hoarding up, pursuing consulships and kingdoms. This life of theirs is past and is no more. Come down to Trajan's days. You'll see the same things again. That life too is past. Consider other periods of time and other nations, and see how many, after their keen pursuits of such kinds, presently fell and were dissolved into their elements. But chiefly represent to your mind those whom you yourself knew vainly distracted with such pursuits, and quitting that course which suited the structure of their nature, not adhering to it, nor contented with it. But you must also remember that in each action there is a care suited and proportioned to the importance of the affair, and thus you'll not be disgusted that you are not allowed to be employed longer than is proper about matters of less value. Wow.
Yeah, that's that's exactly how I feel when I have to do stuff that I don't want to do, that I have to do. I mean, like I'm almost obligated to do it's really of less importance to me. I mean, truthfully, I would rather do this. I mean, this, I get it. You know, it's, these things will just come and go. I mean, all of this will just be on repeat in 100 years from now, in 1,000 years from now. Some other great person will have a similar saying, because it's always been said, it's always happened. And the stuff that we do that we think is so important, so life-changing, will pass as well. So I would rather do what's in my nature. And as a, I don't know, budding philosopher, wannabe philosopher, higher ed dude who does philosophy stuff, all I want to do is spend time developing my mind. So when I have to go do things that I would rather not do, each action, I have to proportion a certain amount of time to it. I have to. And so now I'm not so angry or irritated when I do it. That's what I take from that quote.
Yeah. And also I kind of talking about the time proportion to it, I feel like it definitely helps you prioritize the stuff in your life, you know, give stuff like you said, like we're trying to do. We're budding philosophers. We're trying to, you know, spread the word to schools and how to use these techniques. And, you know, that's our mission. And I feel like that's a lot of times I'll be if I'm not doing this, I'm daydreaming about it. If I'm not, you know, hustling, trying to get people to see, hey, this stuff is valuable, I'm thinking about ways to do that, you know? So it definitely makes sense. And in kind of relation to our Confederate statue situation, I just like how he reflects that in 100 years, the cycle will repeat with some other controversial statue or some other thing. And so it's just a great observation.
Right. I mean, as long as your skin is thin and easily offended, someone will always be angry when a statue is erected. I mean, Marcus said it so well when he said, and I know, don't quote me, I always paraphrase now, you know, the injury only afflicts those who feel it, or something to that, you know, regard. So I get it. And it will always be here until everyone becomes a Stoic.
For sure, for sure. All right, so let's see the next one. I think this was kind of a similar message, just kind of written in a different section. Yeah. So it says, constantly consider how all things such as they are now, in time past also were, and consider that they will be the same again. There it is. And place before thy eyes entire dramas and stages of the same form, whatever thou hast learned from thy experience or from older history. For example, the whole court of Hadrian, and the whole court of Antoninus, and the whole court of Philip, Alexander, Crassus. For all those were such dramas as we see now, only with different actors. I love it. I love it.
Nothing new under the sun, right?
Yeah, nothing new under the sun. And I love how he puts this is kind of a nerdy observation, but I love how Marcus puts Alexander in there in that list, because one of the big, and his dad, his father Philip, because obviously one of the biggest early Greek conquerors, and obviously in the Greek history, those guys were really kind of renowned and respected for the land that they conquered. And Marcus is just like, yeah, there'll be another one. Who cares? You know, I love that. I really think that that's cool.
Let me ask you a question. Why do you think he writes this to himself? And let's think about it from this perspective. Marcus, at this point in his life, is a practicing daily Stoic, right? So he's writing these meditations just as, you know, like daily reminders, like, hey, Marcus, remember, you know, even what was big and great then will pass too, yada, yada, yada. Why do you think he's writing this to himself? What is he working on in reminding himself of something like this?
Yeah, I feel like I ponder that question all the time when I read Marcus, because even in the beginning, when I started reading the first quote, I was like, no, he's writing this to himself. He's not telling us what to do. He's reflecting on his own stuff. And that's really powerful.
What I think it is, Bob, is his own mortality. You know, Marcus speaks so much about death, right? He's always reflecting on not necessarily on death, but how natural it is to be, headed toward everyone's end. And, either you're going to go to a God or you're going to go to atoms. Either way, you're going to go back somewhere. So if I were to write something like this, I would write it as a reminder that although you've got a doctorate and you've got a fancy life and life is good, and just remember that 100 years ago, some other guy had a fancy degree and he probably owned a bunch of property, and that time passed too. Yours will pass too, Dobby. And get off your high horse from time to time, right? You're only mortal. Don't think so much of yourself. I think Marcus was writing this particular meditation for that reason. I mean, he had all of Rome. This is a great way to practice what cardinal virtue? Temperance? I don't know. But that's why I would write something like this.
Wow, that's awesome. And I really like how he puts in actually his family line by saying the court of Antoninus. So he's actually making that observation about his own line.
Oh,
so
I didn't
that's
even
pretty
know that
cool.
was his whole,
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. So
Cool.
that's kind of a cool little perspective on that too. And it's crazy because in the beginning he really respects his teachers and his family and his adoptive father, and it's really cool to see. And so kind of taking it back to the statues again, there's this pattern. There's this, if we're not talking about the statues, we're talking about something else. Just name something else that takes its place. I feel like that mechanism of framing really, like you said, Dobby, I think it really does sort of make us come to a place of humility when we look at all this stuff. And every single thing that happens, even if we're trying to make progress, which a lot of people that think about the Confederate statues and should we have them probably have, they want to make progress. We need to just chill sometimes in our attempts to attain it. I think that will add definitely adds a lot of mental peace and calmness.
Well, I love what you said, Bob, to kind of just chill. So what you're saying is they need to remove the anger that they've attached to the effort of making progress. I mean, essentially, what we all want is progression toward, something we all agree upon. The problem is that the passion still exists, and we attach anger as fuel, or maybe it's not anger, maybe it's just extreme passion, whatever you call it. It accompanies the effort, and your passion matches with their passion. And so we have a great opportunity to progress. The only problem is the passions are uncontrollable. And until we can see past them, we'll always have this clashing of opinions, fueled by passion and justifications for both sides. It's easy to see both sides of the argument when both people are as passionate as each other are about them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely can see that. And I don't know, man. It's just like that. I shared with Dobby a podcast, kind of a newsreel of Daryl Davis, and he was a traveling musician. And it's an amazing story about this, this African-American musician. He gets asked at the bar one day after a show for, this guy wants to buy him a drink, and he realizes that he's the Grand Wizard of the KKK. And that's a huge, wow, mind-blowing moment. And the way that he disarmed Daryl Davis, the way that he disarmed the whole sort of passion and crazed thinking that this Grand Wizard had, just by simply being there and just being relaxed and listening and being empathetic and saying, oh, I can see where you're coming from, but here's a better way to look at it from my perspective. Right. It was so powerful. And yeah.
When you can detach the symbolism from the man, his ornamental decorations, whether it's a hood or it's a black power fist, when you can strip the man down mentally and just see him for a man or a woman, you can really have an enriching conversation where we can have a difference of opinion, because, you know, that's what people do. But we don't have to allow our symbolism to, you know, take over the conversation and fight on our behalf. You know, it's really, I didn't mean to interject with the story. The story is beautiful, man, but the way he disarmed people, if everyone could think like that, Bob, we could really have some real dialogue without all of the heat behind it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was really powerful. Definitely recommend that. It's on NPR. Daryl Davis. I think the episode is called The Klan. So check it out. Always worth a listen. So the next one, or no, I think the next one's after. I think it's after this slide. But the next step, looking inward. Oh man, this is where a lot of people get in trouble because a lot of people forget to do or don't even know to do this. So, and it's frustrating. But anyways, looking inward to our feelings. So many people feel anger towards seeing the statues. Some Southerners feel a sense of Southern pride with the statues. So kind of that alternate perspective. And then some educators, and being educators, we hear all kinds of opinions all the time about it, see the value of the statues for teaching moments. But I want to stress that that is definitely not all teachers, because even at my school that I work at, and I'm sure where Dobby works, I mean, there are a wide range of different, you know, reasons about that. So, yeah. Did you want to add anything to this or just keep going?
I mean, I'll just say that as long as people are offended by images, words, sounds, and anything else, and they have a platform or a voice or an opportunity to voice their frustration and bring forth change, we'll always have this. And I know it sounds unrealistic to say, how could you not be offended by seeing something like that? To which I would say, if I went to China and I saw a statue of somebody, I probably wouldn't feel anything. Honestly, my 9-year-old would see a statue and not know anything. He wouldn't feel anything. He doesn't know who the statue is. It means nothing to him. Now, is that should we all do that and forget I'm not saying that either. What I'm saying is that as long as people feel a sense of injustice because it exists, the other side will always feel justified in it existing. And so here we go, over and over.
That's powerful. I think that you hit the issue correctly. It's interesting to see that these protests and stuff that are about, you know, George Floyd and Eric Gardner and, you know, all of these recent things that have happened. It's interesting to see. It's almost like, oh, and by the way, there's statues. You know, it's almost like, oh, we have attention now that we're trying to get, you know, the police reformed. We're trying to make changes, but oh, by the way, there's statues too. You know, I feel like it's kind of like some people see it as an opportunity to just be angry, and justifiably so, and almost get attention and positive reputation from it. I feel like it's kind of one of those scenarios.
Yeah, this is man's cycle. This is part of the cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And as Stoics, it's peaceful to look into it as sort of an outsider, and then to not be in some sort of dogma or in some sort of indoctrination, and just be like, okay, we need to check our passions. Let's look at this. Let's look at it. Can an object offend us? Well, the Stoics say that we shouldn't take offense to objects, or anything for that matter, really. And so, but then again, like you said, is it something honorable that we should have up? Now that's a very important question as well. Does it bring honor? Is it a beneficial thing? Is it a good memorial to have? That's definitely another important question to consider too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So here is your Epictetus. And I really like this quote too. So did you want to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, I'll read this.
Nice.
All right. So, let me move this box over here. There we go. All right. So Epictetus, if it's true what the philosophers say, that it is for one and the same reason that all people give their assent, right? Namely because they feel that something is the case, or they refuse their assent because they feel it's not the case, or by Zeus, that they suspend their judgment because they feel that the matter is uncertain. And also regarding motivation towards something, right? Because they feel that it conduces to their advantage. And it's impossible to judge one thing to be advantageous and yet to desire something else. So if all of this is in fact true, why is it then that we are still angry with so many people? Well, they're thieves, someone says, and robbers. What do you mean, thieves and robbers? That they've fallen into error with regard to what's good and bad? I mean, should we be angry with them then, or should we merely feel pity for them? I mean, just show them where they've gone wrong, and you'll see how they desist from their faults. But if they fail to see it, they've got nothing better to depend upon than their own personal opinion, right? This is what we've been talking about. This is exactly what we've been talking about. But here's the kicker, Bob. You have to go back to the beginning of the quote. If it's true what the philosophers say, you have to agree with everything that's said thereafter. So here's how this becomes confusing for people. And I know this is kind of a sidetrack from the topic of the statues. All of this writing is in an argumentative with a premise, and there's a style to this. And so you have to understand that if you agree to the premise that if all people give their assent, if all people agree to do something because they believe, that they should be, or they refuse to do something because they don't feel it's the case, or they kind of like don't know what to do because they're uncertain. And if it comes to motivation, that they do what's, advantageous to themselves. If you agree with all of this, then why are you angry, right? So if you can agree to that, then ask yourself, why am I angry? Why am I angry at anybody? If people do what they think is in their best interest, or not do what they think is in their best interest. And then you get upset with them and say, well, my wife gets upset because she works at a store and people steal. So she's upset. So why are you upset? Well, they're always stealing. Well, they don't know the difference between good and bad. They're hungry. They're thieves. That's what thieves do. Stop being angry with them. Feel sorry for them. You are learning something that they don't know. You're trying to better yourself. Take appropriate action and call the police. But stop being angry at people when they do what they think is in their best interest. That's what this quote says. And if we can remember that, we'll stop being angry at people because they only do what they think is either in their best interest or is of some advantage to them.
Wow, man, that quote I feel like you reading it, because you have such a good way of reading it. I feel like it has a really powerful effect. And yeah, man, it's good. People, and it goes back to that one comment that you made earlier on in our seminar, which is people don't fall into error necessarily on purpose. Right. They don't, there needs to be it's not something that people just do. It's something, the practices that we're talking about, you have to be taught how to do it. Right. And there's kind of a mentorship that goes on, and there's accountability. A lot of people, they want to get on the self-help train, and they're like, I see people in the macho gym culture and the fitness people culture all the time. They're just like, yeah, we think tough and we don't practice, and we're just like that. Right. And I think that this is a very good status check on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Sweet. All right. Next.
Oh, is there another one?
Step 5, the behaviors. So these are the kind of the different behaviors that are going on in response to people's notions about the statue. So obviously there's protests. We've heard it all in the news. Dobby's backyard behind that fence is the police station in Ferguson.
Yes, sir.
So we, and that was actually crazy because he was nice enough to invite me over. And last week, and as I was leaving the street, there were people that were gathered out front, and it is still going on. I mean, it's not, people are still out there blocking and trying to get their voices heard. And also there's graffiti and property damage. I've seen statues that, people spray paint, and there was one that was thrown into like a creek or a river. I don't think that was a Confederate statue. Maybe I'm wrong, and then obviously the people are trying to enact legislation to decide the fate of the statues. And here's kind of where you get fired up, Dobby, because you're pretty passionate about this concept, is the lots of opinions from the crowd.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
the notion that the expectation, oh man, there was something. Can you go back to the last slide? I'm going to get back to this one. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Sorry about that. You can go to the next slide. So the expectation isn't that the crowd will all of a sudden become reflective citizens and not remain passionate about issues. That's never going to happen. The opinions of the crowd are always, if not motivated, supported by, or helped by their passion. I mean, it's necessary to get their voices heard. Some will be louder than others. However, it is the responsibility of those in positions of leadership to have a higher understanding of right and wrong, good and evil, good and bad, however you want to frame it, and not be motivated by their own passions. What often happens is you have a member of the crowd becomes a person in office and in a leadership position with the same energy of the crowd from which they've come. So now you've got passionate leadership that's just as angry as other passionate leadership. Where's the civil, level-headed opinion? It doesn't exist. We live in a world where energy is news, where fighting sells. I mean, we have to understand that nothing the crowd does is surprising, and they shouldn't be. The expectation shouldn't be any different. It should be different of those in positions to lead, not from positions of passion, but from reason, right? So until you have different types of people at that position, you're always going to have members of the crowd leading other members of the crowd. Passions, more passions. It's never ending. So when you come to a reasonable solution, it only benefits half of the crowd. The other half is still upset. It's not reasonable because it wasn't based on reason. It was based on passion. Maybe there was some reason thrown in, but the passion kept the energy going. And it kept the media involved, and it kept the Facebook likes up, and it kept everybody engaged. And reason somehow just kind of, so these aren't reasonable solutions because they don't benefit everyone. And the Stoics believe that reason is what makes us distinctly different than the beast. And when employed, we should all benefit from what is a reasonable solution. But these aren't reasonable solutions. These are beneficial solutions to one half of the group. And if you're in that half, it benefits you. If you're not, it doesn't. Thus conflict.
Yeah. And one of the things that Stoicism brings that is so crucial for today's societal exchanges, today's politics, is that ability to just calm down, check your passions, check your emotions for just a sec. I mean, just even for the duration of the conversation with this person. If that, even if that, let alone all the time, but if that could happen, I feel like there's just so much progress that we can make. And that, I see exchanges on YouTube all the time. I'll watch people debate a certain topic, and not even necessarily the statues, and they'll bring up a point and it just dissolves into this madness of anger and trying to, I mean, even the tone of voice, the aggression of the presenter, it really is evident for sure.
Well, see, Bob, what people are being asked to do is to calm down without understanding how to form a better judgment about the situation. It's almost ass backwards, right? If you can't assess this situation as something that doesn't offend you, how am I supposed to calm down? He upset me. What you mean calm down? I'm hot. What we have to do first is not get you hot, right? So, hold on one second. All right. Okay. Can you give me
Yeah, you got to take something?
I do, real quick.
Okay, cool. I'll go on with the rest of the slide. So as he was saying, the crowd, the fifth, where are we on? Fifth. As Stoics, we understand the view of the crowd, but we aren't affected by them. And then the last bullet on the page, after this is said and done, we can then come to a reasonable solution. But only after, and that's the key point, only after we can have an accurate view of what is happening. What is nature? What does nature intend to happen with the crowd? How are we supposed to view other people that we're trying to come to a solution with? How can you be cooperative? Once we start to learn these types of things, we can start to get to the point where we can talk to coming to a reasonable solution about statues, about who takes care of the kids on the weekend, who, the list goes on and on.
Man, I don't usually talk about this with people, but Stoicism, if adhered to and if done correctly, really brings you so much closer to nature, and for me personally, to God. Because when I started doing this Stoicism stuff and, like removing myself from the crowd, I really had a disdain. I didn't want to be around people. Like I knew something and they didn't, and I was haughty and arrogant, and I just didn't like people. And it was weird. I was transforming, but I didn't want to be around the crowd because I didn't share their opinion anymore. And then over time, I've developed just this love for people. I mean, it's weird. I love the festival. I love being around people because I don't have this haughty arrogance now, and I don't necessarily, I don't pity them either. I understand that people go wrong inadvertently and they do what's in their best interest. And I'm not gonna hate this racist white woman. She thinks she's doing what's in her best interest. She hasn't harmed me. She's harming herself with these bad judgments. You see how, we can deflect all of this if you honestly believe and have a love for people. I didn't have this before Stoicism. And with this tool, I really do feel like, I don't know, I haven't been this happy and tranquil. That's the gift of philosophy, the tranquility of the mind, if done consistently, is amazing. And I think what we're doing, Bob, between me and you, man, with behavior mods and what we're going to do with education, if people can get a little bit of this, we could really change some lives, man.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. And also, like, as you said, the woman in your example, to at the root of the issue, racism, bias, stereotyping people, at the root, it's bad judgment. It really is it's people do not have good judgment, and it's stupid to think a certain way about something that really doesn't have an effect on your interactions with somebody. If you have something that really impedes your interaction with someone, whether it be race, whether it be religion, whether it be ageism, whether it be ableism, all these kind of intersectional things that people are bringing up today,
Right.
it is bad judgment because I feel like I could ramble on with that, but
Watch this, Bob. I'm gonna play the other side of the coin for you. What about the people who have, because here's gonna be the argument. Well, some people just choose to be evil. They know what they're doing and they're gonna do it anyway. What do you say to that, Mr. Stoic? Huh? Well, to that point, we say let the law deal with them as the law should, but without anger and malice. Well, they've gotten out of jail and they've gone on and they've raped somebody and they've killed more people. What should we do now, Mr. Stoic? Put them on an island or whatever the law does to people that break offenses, punish them, but without defamation of character. They're still our brother and sister. They've gone wrong. They've made an error. Why are you punching him on the way to the jail? Just get rid of him.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
We have to enact our laws, but we don't have to do it with such malice toward our fellow citizens.
Yeah. And that, Dobby, I think is where you get the problems with the police, because they add extra. They don't just apply justice a lot of times anymore. It depends on the person again, but most of the time you get these, people that get really excited, emotions, right? The judgments are in states with a lot of adrenaline and things like this. And it's not merely the application of justice. It is extra stuff. It is yelling at people. It is beating people that you don't need to. It's, there's a lot of
uncontrolled passions.
Yep, for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
And here's the thing, Bob. It would be one thing if it were neglectful. Sometimes it's intentionally neglected and purposefully. And that's the sad part, when it's not incited because you're naturally worried for your life as the officer. He has a gun. I have a gun. It's when you go into the situation prepared to bring out the passions and you look for any opportunity to excite them. And now you justify your behavior because as someone who knows the law, well, how easy is it to create energy where none really exists? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Sorry, that was great. For sure. Definitely some truth. A lot. It is truth. Definitely truth in that. All right. And that? No, that's it. That's the last one, I think.
Oh, it was? Okay. All right. So I didn't know if there's any. I was kind of freaking out because I didn't know if there's anything more. But so kind of bringing it all together. So I'm going to go back to the outline of the 5 steps that we've come up with. By the way, these steps, this is the mental ascension that we have been talking about with behavior mods, the model that we use. We deconstruct a lot of different things, whether it be, getting a bad grade and getting angry at the teacher, whether it's so-and-so has better clothes than me, I want to be like them, whether it's, in some cases, even more severe interactions where there's physical violence with, school fights. This is the model that we use to initially deconstruct and look at and kind of put it under a magnifying glass. So these 5 things we looked at we used the statues as kind of an example to do that. And so when we talk about deconstructing, the Stoic practice of that, we're talking about doing just this. And it takes time. Yeah. It's not something that it's just like, I'll do one of these steps and be done. No, you have to sometimes, depending on your level of practice, depending on where you are, it might take a bit of time to knock out. So
yeah, absolutely. It's not something that's gotten within a week or two, and don't think that by buying a book and reading it that all of a sudden, this will just kind of be what you naturally do. But if you can stick with it, it is certainly beneficial.
Yeah. And notice, and this is kind of what it's like to step back from our emotions. Notice that Dobby and I never said, explicitly what the right way to go is on this issue, because it's the practice of getting to people are going to have their agreements and disagreements all the time, based on, a lot of interpretations, upbringing. But it's important to know as a Stoic that it's often the journey to the conclusion that really you build your true character in a lot of ways.
Couldn't have said it any better, Bob.
So yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring it back full circle, and nice. I guess we're ending do you have anything else to add? I mean, we have a few minutes left, but we're pretty close to an hour.
No, I mean, I could always ramble on and on, but
no, not you, man.
I know, right? I know. God, I love this stuff, man.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and stay tuned because hopefully we have some hooks out that we're trying to get some bites with a few schools, and we're seeing an interest. So just kind of an update with that. Dobby's had people reach out. I've had some people reach out. So hopefully somewhere we'll get some virtual stuff, if not face to face, this next.
If you guys like this, if you like this and you see value in what we're doing, and you see a way that it's applicable to a lesson plan or to an after school program, or I mean, honestly, to yourselves personally, this is all we do. And when I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm practicing, and all day and all night, I've turned into some kind of, I don't know, I'm just very aware of everything now. Drives my wife crazy still. But, oh, Bob, I'll call you after this. I got to tell you a story.
Okay. All right. So I guess, yeah, for sure. Thanks everyone. And stay tuned, faux show, because we got more coming. All right. Cool.
Peace.
Peace.
Man, that was a good one.